You guys got my text this morning, right?
Yes.
Welcome to the morning show, gentlemen. Joe, is your coffee all ready to go? You got a mug there, fired up?
So strong, so blonde. What more can you
All
ask?
right. Jeff, I know you were drinking yours, so that
I
means
got
we're
my
all go.
I got my butter two mug going on here.
Oh, nice, nice. That's great. Hey, let me clean house or do my housekeeping here real quick, and then we'll get started. Hey, we need to thank Elka Suspension for bringing these shows to you. They do a great job providing the best suspension in the industry. So if you're looking for a great ride, look at Elka. They'll take good care of you. As far as tires go, GBC sells the best line of tires for your ATV or your UTV. I've told you many times on the show, I have them on my truck as well. So if you're looking for tires for something that you have that's rolling, GBC is the company that you should be calling. We need to thank the Blunt family for being ATV enthusiasts because they help ATV-TALK bring you more shows like this. Craig Christie from Christie Editorial or Christie's. He is an ATV enthusiast. He is also the 2009 overall score champion in ATVs. He also supports the show. Doesn't want any credit like that, but I don't feel that it's. I should be telling you all about him because he's a beacon of light in our industry, trying to help us grow. Antelope Slot Canyon Tours. If you're going on vacation this summer, hey, get out to the canyons. This place in Page, Arizona is amazing. If you're an amateur photographer or do any photography at all, this is a place you want to go because it changes every season, sometimes every month. So get out there and check those out. Antelope Slot Canyon. They offer tours as well. So check that out. Gentlemen, I don't know if you read the pre-race or the pre-report for today. Some crazy things in motocross have happened with Jet Lawrence going down last Tuesday with a wrist injury, similar to Webb's, and he's out for the entirety of the year. That changes the whole motocross scene. Joe, I don't know if you watched yesterday.
No, I was pretty occupied yesterday.
Didn't miss anything. It was a Saxton show. Hunter tried to do better, but he's just not the guy. You know, it's the Saxton show now, and I don't think there's anybody out there that's going to beat that guy. He's in great physical condition. He's a great rider. My opinion of him has slightly changed because I got to sit down and actually physically watch his talents and watch him ride, and he is a very talented young man.
Yeah, I went last to first a couple of races ago, so he's pretty undeniably fast.
Yeah, and his skills when you watch him ride through the rough, he's so smooth. Just looks like poetry in motion. Just he has total control of that machine. Hunter is more of a knock the wall down guy. He's just pounding it out, not quite as smooth, not quite as calculated, but still a very talented man as well. Just I just don't think he's on Sexton's level. Plessinger got second, I believe, for the day, which that made the fans super happy.
Makes me
He's a fan favorite. Um, in ATV in the ATV world, our two professionals in motocross are still perfect and are still doing their thing. Kinsey is cracking the record books open, and so is Joel. I believe Joel now has tied Chad Wienen in overall wins.
wow.
Yeah, so that's a little scary that he's done it and still young and still has a long career to grow, I would say. I don't know what your guys' opinions are on that, but this is shattering the record books, and not just breaking them. So good
Have we already
stuff.
Yeah, Brandon.
did we already have a perfect season in ATV motocross?
This will be the first if he can pull it off.
And imagine if they both pull it off.
Oh, that would be even more exciting and more incredible. You know, um, I know that Brandon Hogue was fastest qualifier.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's really turned it up lately. He
Yeah.
finished second in both motos.
And led. So I saw a little brief video with Joel in third. I think Ford was in the lead. Wolf led for a little while, got the whole shot, led. Joel made short work of him in the first moto, but um, Hogue in the second moto, I believe it was Hogue and Ford out front. Um, Joel eventually passed them both and drove away, but still they're trying. I mean, you got to hand it to these guys. They know how fast this man is, and I think there's a little bit of fear in them of his speed, but they're trying. They're digging deep. I hate that phrase, but they are down deep inside and pulling it out and making it happen. Thanks for laughing at me, Jeff. Appreciate that. What do you guys think? Joe, go ahead.
I don't know if it's a fear issue as much as, it's just disheartening. It's got to be tough for those guys to show up every week, and I'm not taking anything away from any of them, but so when you show up and you're just like, what am I battling for today? Second, third, fourth, that's got to be a little disheartening because, when you get to that level, you're there to win. So.
Right. And I just in the chat, Ian just said that Hogue was in front of Hetrick for 4 laps. It, Joel could be retired. He could be. Jeff, I didn't get your opinion on this.
I'm watching Brandon Hogue now. He's really turned up the heat, and we'll see what he can do. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. But it gives him a goal, I guess, to go after. But I don't know how anybody stops Joel Hetrick or catches him at this point or stays ahead of him.
There's every champion that we thought was never going to be beat got beat. Every one of them.
Yeah.
By somebody. Someone, their Achilles heel was someone out there. Joel hasn't met his yet. It was Chad Wienen for a while. I haven't got to talk to Chad, but I got a feeling that in 2025, Chad Wienen is going to be back on the gate.
Yeah. It'd be interesting.
I don't think that's a bad thing. But as far as accomplishments in a career, Chad's already had his career. He is helping the industry by developing Max Lindquist and maybe some other riders. And if you look at Max progress as he went back to the Wienen program with his mentor in Chad, his finishes are better. He's been third, fourth a lot of the year. And I think that Chad has a lot to give back to the sport as far as teaching young men like Max to develop their skill set. And Jeremiah Johnson also helping him.
Yeah.
Two great guys. Joe, you just look so stoic sitting there, man.
I think his screen froze up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking there for a second.
No.
Hey, you mentioned that you just had another video drop. Can you tell us about that real quick, Joe?
Well, we just wrapped up a test on another machine from KO. We tested their little Jackal 200. Anybody who watches regularly has heard us discuss the S200. I'm sorry, the A300. Get it right. Tested the Jackal 200, hoping for the A300, which is a fuel-injected 300 four-stroke they have in Europe that rumor has it they're working to bring to the States, hopefully, probably. More on that as we hear, and we're allowed to talk about it. But meanwhile, they have a side-by-side. Nothing for the big kids, just for the 10 and up crowd. They have a unit called the S200. It's it's a good little unit, from our experience. I know Dirt Wheels has a review coming on it, yeah, next month. So looking forward to seeing that. And it's an interesting machine, compared to what's out there right now with the Razor 200. This is a much larger car, not engine wise, but chassis and suspension wise, it's quite a bit bigger. And it's like 10.5 inches wider, 9.5 inches longer, a couple inches shorter overall. The seat height is lower. So it's a very stable, planted, good handling little car. It's got rack and pinion steering. It has 3 inches, 3.5 inches more than the Razor front and rear, where that car has 7 and 7. This one's 10 and 10.5. And one thing that was, I would have to say, most surprising about the unit is that, typically the biggest dead giveaway, I think Jeff would agree, like, other than the fact that they're usually ugly, and this vehicle is not, when you jump on a Chinese machine, usually the very first thing you notice is like, oh, it's Chinese. The suspension sucks. It's harsh over small bumps. It bottoms over big bumps. That's typically Chinese suspension. But like, whoever developed this car, they developed it for off-roading. The suspension it's extremely active over small bumps. It eats up the micro terrain well, offers a good amount of bottoming resistance. The suspension and handling are far better than we might have expected, and I think a lot of other people would expect. Engine needs a little jetting to get it perfect, and I think we could get a little bit more climbing out of it, a little better climbing prowess with a little different clutch setup. This is just minor stuff that's inexpensive, but it seems like the big expensive things like the chassis suspension, you wouldn't have to touch it for a while. Even if you wanted to race, I think it's probably good enough to get out there and compete. I'm interested to see as more aftermarket comes out for this car. It's already being raced. KO has a race support rider that Luke Strickland, I believe his name is. Excuse me if I get it wrong. I only said it once in the video, but they're working on, they already have a clutch set up for it. Thing rockets out of the hole. They've got that thing to where it'll do some climbing, no problem. And they're working on cams, pistons, valve springs, things like that. It has a few shortcomings, but like the overall package is pretty solid. Jeff, what do you? Jeff drove it at Glen Helen.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's surprisingly good. Like Joe said, the chassis is just solid. If you look at it, it's got some pretty thick piping on it. The welds are good. Suspension is great. Rack and pinion steering. For where we were riding, the power was solid. We were actually on the mini track at Glen Helen. I was out there with Daryl Eklund, who's a former managing editor over at Motocross Action. So we spent the day out there with KO. And I got my shoot done, shooting the kids out there riding, and I said, okay, let me take this thing for a couple of laps. And so the kids reluctantly gave it up. I popped in the seat. And about, I don't know, 20 laps later, I could see the look in their face. I was having a lot of fun. It's kind of like a just deluxe. This is probably it's better than this. But it's like a deluxe go-kart. You sit low, you sit in it. It's very sporty. And I was hitting the little tabletops on this track as hard as I could, and it wasn't bottoming out or kicking anything really hard. We did have a fuel customs intake on that particular model, so the engine, it was very linear. We didn't have any big uphills or anything like that, but it came into the corners just track straight. I had more fun than I should have probably in this machine, and I probably should have given it up a little sooner to the other kids that we were riding with. But yeah, it's a neat machine, and there are a ton of opportunities for the aftermarket to get in both the motor, suspension, and everything else for this machine. There's a lot you can do with it.
You know, we don't get to talk about this much. Before I go finish my intro conversations that I had lined up for today. You guys do way more testing with more machines lately than I did in my time. How often do you get to really go have a good time when you're testing certain vehicles or any vehicles? I mean, Jeff, you had a great time driving this car. It's a lot of fun, but realistically, how often is it a lot of fun?
It used to be back in the day, we would get all our photos and testing done, and then we'd have an hour maybe left when we would go somewhere with a manufacturer to test, where we would just, hit it hard with these vehicles and have a lot of fun. Some of the manufacturers are going for more lifestyle content. One in particular is Yamaha. We do a lot of RMAX stuff with them and Wolverine stuff with them, where they take us to some really cool locations. One of the ones we've been spending a lot of time in Colorado. One of the places there, it's about 30 miles east of Moab, Utah, Gateway, Colorado. They took us up there, put us up in a resort, but we did 2 solid days of riding and enjoying ourselves. And they've actually been bringing out some photographers and videographers to help us out with our stuff, so we can actually spend more time experiencing the ride and the adventure itself also. So I think that's where a lot of the manufacturers are starting to go. They want to, see photos, not so much technical, but more of where you can go with these machines, what you can do, the places you can see, and, the distances you can get out there and everything. It's changed a little bit.
That's cool. Joe, how do you interpret that?
Well, it's press events are a good time to get a lot of time in the driver's seat, or behind the handlebars. Yeah, that's the time when I get, more of that typically than here at home. I throw a leg over everything we get, but it's hard to go out and rack up tons and tons of miles. Typically, I film because I know a lot of guys that can ride and ride well or drive well, and I kind of let them do their thing. And it's a little more difficult to find somebody who understands camera settings and how to hold it and how to get the most out of it. So, I ride as much as I can. I take a test of everything we get, but I usually leave putting most of the miles onto the test riders, because they're better at that. I'm better at filming, and that way we get a better video and people can see how these things can perform. But it's kind of becoming more difficult to do it to go out and get seat time, because certain manufacturers are not upholding their end of the bargain when it comes to taking responsibility for the fact that they want us to drive hard and they want us to make exciting content. Polaris issue we discussed a few weeks ago. We've had an internal discussion with them, and we're waiting to hear their thoughts. But they like to hand us bills if anything gets tweaked at all. And anybody who's ridden off road knows that it's not if you're going to bend to something, it's when you're going to bend to something. It's going to happen. So that's making it more difficult with their company, but everybody else is great. So
that's pretty awesome. I have got to go shoot. I've been behind the camera with you, Joe, which I wish you'd have gave me a little bit better instructions on the do's and the don'ts, because I did take some chances that he told me afterwards I should not have.
Those were your best shots, though. I didn't ruin it. It was great. I never stand at the outside edge of the corner where the car or the quad is drifting toward me. That's the best place to get cool drift shots, but we call it the kill zone, because that's where you're most likely to die as the cameraman. So,
and I knew that part, but he didn't tell me don't be on the downside of the jump. And I was on the downside of the jump, and I not only did I scare myself, I scared one of the riders. because I was so close to the track. But I got to be in front of the camera with Jeff. That's a little safer place to be. So I've got to shoot with both of you, and I appreciate that. You guys are awesome. I have one last little tidbit before we get into the real meat of the topics today. F1, I don't know if you guys are much fans. My father is a huge fan, and I've watched a lot of F1 racing. And for the first time in the British Grand Prix history, they have 3 British drivers in the front, 1, 2, 3 on the pole, on the starting grid. It's unbelievable. The fans went nuts. I got to watch it yesterday on television, and it was pretty exciting to see. The 2 Mercedes on the front and Landon Norris in his car. And it was just something special in sports. I know that we're ATV enthusiasts, but how often do you get to see history being made like that on television in a sport that's as old as F1? And it's the first time they've ever done it. So it meant something to me. I don't know about you guys, but it was pretty exciting.
I went to the movies yesterday, so I didn't get to see it.
Hey, thanks for that text telling me you got home okay.
Oh, hey, let me send it right now.
That's okay. Not everybody
Sorry
knows.
about that.
On 4th of July, Jeff and I spent the day together putting together a YFC 450R. That will be a discussion that we talk about in the future. But I want to relate this to you, Joe. I'm going to start with you, and then Jeff, we're going to roll in. I have 2 topics that I want to talk about. Joe, you started this discussion with me 2 years ago about the top 5 best sport quads of all time. And that conversation has roared and fizzled and roared and fizzled. I want to ignite it a little bit because Jeff and I had a little bit of a conversation about the top 3 sport quads. The other topic that I want to talk about that we'll get into as well is the top 5 greatest ATV racers of all time. I want to start these discussions today, if we could. We'll start with the top 5 sport quads, and we'll roll into the riders at the end, and then next week we can finish with the riders and some of the ATV talk. Joe, I'm going to start with you because you are very passionate about your picks, and this is kind of a topic that you started, and I want to make sure that you get yours in first. How's that?
Let's kind of add a little bit of context to it. Are we talking about my list was basically the top 5 used sport ATV buys.
Yes, to be accurate, that's how the conversation started with you. Let's offshoot it just a little bit and go with the top 5 greatest sport quads of all time.
Okay. I would have to say not necessarily in this order, but I'll start at the top of the heap. What would be the number 1 spot and try to work backwards a little bit. And it's hard to say which one, but I would say because of their impacts on the sport, TRX 250R, YFZ 450 / YFZ 450R number 2, because those are the 2 machines that, due to just the market being what it is and manufacturers getting all in and then becoming uninvolved, those are the 2 machines, 3 if you count YFZ and YFZ 450R separately. I'm really not for this one. But I would say that those are the 2, and Yamaha's got it's the 20th anniversary of the carbureted YFZ 450, which, to the development of the YFZ 450R. So for the amount of time that those machines have carried this sport and the amount of championships that they racked up, I mean, that's number 1 and number 2 easily. Number 3, I'm just pulling this out of thin air. I'd probably have to put the Banshee at number 3, just because It's so sought after. It's so iconic. The two-stroke being a twin. Look at what they're selling for now. Arguably the best dune machine ever built. It doesn't, not a great tight turning machine, but it doesn't have to be in the dunes. It's got to, swoop around bowls. So, I'd say that's a great one. I'd probably put, that's number 3. Number 4, I'd probably pitch it to the 400EX. I don't know that this would be my final list if I had days to think about it, but I'd probably say in the 3rd place or 4th place, like 400EX. It reignited the sport back in 1998 as a 99 model. It was the top sport quad as far as building a race bike for motocross or cross country that you could buy new for like a year or two until Suzuki came out with the Z400, which was, incrementally better out of the box, a little faster, maybe a little better suspension, and then the more mods you do to the Suzuki, the better it would get. But the 400EX was a bike we waited for 10 years. There was so much anticipation for it. There was so much hype about it. And even though its time as the top sport machine that you could buy for competition only lasted about 2 years, it was still a great trail machine, especially if you didn't really go hog wild with that motor. If you left it relatively stock, it still had that good Honda, reliability. Just don't take out your own head studs and put them back in if you don't have a torque wrench, and don't follow instructions because you'll ruin it. But it handles good. It's got easy to use power. It has excellent brakes. It has good ergonomics. It could be one of the best wreck bikes on the market again if Honda just brought it back with fuel injection and a couple little minor things. So that's number 4. For number 5, I'm gonna either, and I'll give 2 and let the people argue it out. I would say either the Blaster or the Raptor 250. Raptor 250 had a much shorter run. Raptor 250 was a better handling ATV, handled a little bit better, just geometry and stuff. But I'm more of a Blaster guy. I like 2 strokes. I like 4 strokes, but it's a 2-stroke. You can still buy them for quite a bit less money than a Raptor 250 because the kids are cannibalizing them. But that ATV, throughout its run, it was the bike that made me fall in love with ATVs, because as a 17, 16-year-old kid, when I first saw the Blaster, actually 14, back in 1990, the price of that machine, I looked at it and it's like, oh, I could afford to go buy that. It was relatable. I actually thought I could earn enough money to purchase one new. And it was sporty, and it was like a perfect little beginner bike for a teenager who wanted to get out and do some sport riding. There's still there's a ton of them out there. You can still pick them up relatively inexpensively. Throw an axle, some tires, a pipe on it, pull the airbox lid and jet it. You got a backyard just killer fun machine. It develops a hit, opens up the top end. It's a 2-stroke, and it doesn't take much to make it quick, and it's about as reliable as a brick. So there's my top 5.
Nice. Jeff, I saw you cheating down there taking notes. What do you got?
Yeah, man, Joe screwed my list up when he threw the Raptor 250 in there. I was like, oh man, I forgot about that. I love that little quad. Well, I'll just, my list is in no certain order other than number 1 would be the TRX 250R. That machine has been imitated by so many other machines, just components, the chain adjuster on it, everybody couldn't wait to switch their machines over to that chain adjustment style. But so many machines, all the different 450s, they have that same DNA that started with that machine. And I should go back actually to the Suzuki 250, which was really the one that started it all. But obviously the TRX 250R is legendary. I own an 87 right now that I'm looking to build and can't wait to get started. I used to race an 87 back in the day. Loved it. My next four are not in any certain order. Obviously, the TRX 450R has been successful in so many forms of racing, including cross country, motocross, desert, especially score Baja 1000. That's what everybody is racing down in Baja. You'll see a Raptor every once in a while in the desert races out here, but most of the people are still running those 450Rs for their reliability and performance. Next would be the Yamaha YFZ, one of the longest continuously made sport quads. I started out with an 04 YFZ 450, and the YFZ 450R took it to a whole new level with 50-inch width, great performance. Just a solid machine that we were working on this weekend. I cannot wait to get that out to the track with the new mods on it. The Raptor 700R, not the 660. I thought the 660 was a little tippy at the time, but the 700R is probably my favorite ride for duners, especially if you're talking about a stock machine. You can ride those things. They are. I mean, I don't want to take a term that, that the two-wheelers refer to as riding couches, but the 700R is a couch, and it has a ton of torque and power. It actually has about, stock for stock, I think about 10 more horses than the YFZ 450R. And it's not a whole lot heavier. I think it's within 15, 20 pounds of the YFZ 450R. You guys can correct me on that if I'm wrong. What's that?
30 pounds.
30 pounds? Okay. And then another great duner, and one that I remember back in the early 90s, these things were all over the dunes like UTVs are today, would be the Yamaha Banshee. I remember back in the early 90s, I had an 89 Banshee, and that's all you saw out there. Banshees everywhere out at Glamis. It's just a crazy powerhouse, not the best turning machine, but for dune riding and just sick horsepower and the sound and, everything. That was my first high performance ATV that I ever owned. I actually raced desert locally, smaller races on one for a while, and definitely the Yamaha Banshee. I got to throw that out there. I'm sure I would catch a lot of heat if I didn't. I got some runners up though, and one is definitely the Raptor 250. Even a guy my size, I weigh, I'm 230 pounds and 6 foot, and I have a ball on this machine, even out in the dunes, even with some minor mods and stuff. You can go all over the place. They're so easy to throw around and surprisingly responsive, great performance. My understanding is that Yamaha quit making those because of a vendor issue or something. I don't know what that is, but I wish they would bring that one back. And I'm sure all these kids, you go out to the tracks today, whether it's GP racing or motocross or whatever, there's still a ton of these little Raptor 250s that the kids are racing. And I'm going to throw another one out here that I know Lenny's going to argue with me on, but I loved this ATV during its brief existence, the KTM 525XC. I love that quad and got to ride it back east in a lot of tight tree type stuff, GNCC type trails and all that. It was just out of the box. It was a pretty decent performing machine, chrome molly chassis, pretty much more race ready than anything that was ever made before that. So there's my list.
That's quite a broad list. In the chat, most all of the same machines are being brought up. The 400EX, the TRX 250R is most everybody's pick. They're bringing in the Banshees. A couple people don't even mention the YFZ 450s and the YFZ, either one. They mention the LTR. They talk about blasters. And they even talk about 660s. Not too many mentions of the 700. But that's great. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Fire away, Joe.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know where my head was. I have to apologize, and I hate to make my list so blue. Boy, is it. But yeah, I got to kind of boot the 400EX off into the honorable mention category. Obviously, replacing that on my list would be the Raptor 700. I loved it the first time I rode it in Oregon. Maybe I didn't think of it because I live with a couple right now, and so I don't know why, but just Raptor 700. Like, what doesn't it do well? Okay, it's got a little higher center of gravity, but it's not like a Raptor 660. To me, riding a Raptor 660 was like riding a three-wheeler. It's like, except it's a four-wheeler, so you don't expect it to tip as much. But the suspension was way soft, and at the width and the higher CG, Raptor 660, I like the power, but other than that, I didn't love that bike. But the Raptor 700, I mean, it's outstanding. The suspension is plush. Um, the ergonomics are comfortable. No, it's not ergonomics set up for racing. It's ergonomics set up for all day riding and exploration. Like, if you're a guy who's like, I don't know if I want a sport quad or a lightweight 4x4, well, there's the one that kind of crosses over because it's comfortable like a 4x4, but it's got all those key sport characteristics. I mean, the aftermarket is pretty limitless for that bike. And right now, you've got a number of aftermarket people with, all the talk we've done on here over the past year about Raptor 700, it being a real race bike. You've got a number of aftermarket companies that, after all this time, are starting to reevaluate that machine for aftermarket development. What can we do to get that center of gravity down just a little bit and make that thing more of a competition machine? But it's fast. It's a big engine, so it's reliable. Um, it's kind of hard to fault it, in my opinion. It's almost perfect. It's not quite, but it's almost perfect. Um, yeah, motor handling, suspension, and very upgradable. You can turn it into pretty much whatever you want. Yeah, just as an all-around rider, love that bike. Love it.
So I've built a number of machines in my life, and looking at them with their fenders off or in full dress when they're sitting on the stand with no wheels and tires on them, with the suspension bolted on and some of the other accessories, I would have to say the sexiest out of all of them is the Raptor 700. I know there are people out there that will argue that, that it's the 450 or the 250R or whatever, but that Raptor is a beautiful machine sitting there on a stand in build mode with, you've just put the suspension on it and then a wider axle, and it just looks really, really sexy and ready to do battle. It is in my top five, but also I'm partial to the 660 because, as you both know, I raced a 660 for a number of years, had some great success with it. It holds a special place in my heart. I know that it has defects. I know that it has issues, but worked on properly, it was a great machine in its day. The 250R obviously is on there. The Banshee's on there, but I'm going to throw one in there that nobody's talked about, and that's the LT500. That machine is a lot of fun. It has great torque power for your individuals as it's developed. If you work on it correctly, it starts easier. No, it doesn't start easy, but it does start easier as you develop it. Those are the machines that I'm going to gravitate to if we're going to work on them. I didn't mention the YFZ 450R and the TRX 450R because everybody knows how good those machines are, and they're not honorable mentions. I just only have 5 spots. You give me 7 and then they're in there, and there's no particular order. On one day, the YFCR is at the top of my list. At the other next day, it's a Banshee, and the next day it's because I love them all. My
Well,
owner,
how is that even fair? You cap the list at 5 and then you come off with 7
no,
after many of
I'm
our picks.
5. I'm still on 5. I'm just saying I can't go to 7 because of that. The Quadzilla is not wonky. It's a really nice machine. You have to spend some time with it, and you have to learn to love this LT500. It's not a machine that you can just instantly work on. It was proven in the industry that not everybody could make them work, not everybody could make them live. So that's something that you have to look at as well. Uh, Sport quads in general, I like them all. Honorable mentions, Joe has it, the 400EX, but you guys didn't even mention the KFX 700, the heaviest sport quad ever built. This
Why
machine
would
was
we?
awesome.
That thing's,
It was
I mean,
fun.
it was fun, but aside from that, it sucked.
It's just like a moped, dude. You never want your friends, to see you riding it because you got a big smile on your face. You're having a blast riding it. You can do anything you want. It's just not a sexy bike, and I really enjoy it.
No CVTs on my sport quad list.
That's right.
Immediate disqualifier from being a real sport quad. It's got to have a
Gotta have a gearbox. I get that. I totally get that. We could hash this list out forever. I think the clear-cut winner is the 250R. As far as because
Forever.
everybody that I listened to on the list and everybody I read about added the 250R to their list, so it was in the 1 or 2 spot. Maybe not exactly that order.
I'm gonna go back. MX Beans threw a good one out there, and I'd pick it over the 400EX, and that's the LTZ 400. I like that little Suzuki 400.
I was never a huge fan of it.
Yeah,
Worked on quite a few of them.
I like the way it handled and what felt well, balanced in the air. It's liquid cooled, and all that. No, I liked it a little bit better.
400EX with the Suzuki brand.
I
Or I'm sorry, what did I say? The 400.
LTZ
The
400.
LTZ 400. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a liquid cooled 400EX.
I have to agree with Jeff. Like it is, I mean, it definitely is a better bike than the 400EX, minus with the exception of the chain adjustment system and the swing arm. I mean, it is a better bike. It was a little quicker. I didn't hate it as a carbureted bike at all. And when they went to fuel injected, it was, to me, it was almost like they took 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. It ran a little better, I'd say, maybe marginally once it went fuel injected. I like the added width, which gave it a little bit more stability. Well, okay, 3 steps forward and 1 step back. The LTR 450 inspired styling. I thought it was a way better looking bike once they did that update to it. My only complaint with that update when they went fuel injected was they made the suspension too stiff, I think, for the intended rider. The Gen 1 Suzukis, once they put the reservoir shocks on the front, when we used to test that bike, I always kind of joked with, people that I knew. I may have even said it back in our KFX 400 test. I don't remember, but I've said a lot, and that's that the Z400 has the best suspension for the trail in the 450 class, because I felt like the Yamaha, the carbureted YFZ 450, we got to go back to then to when that bike was new. But the YFZ 450 and then even the 450R, they were kind of too stiff for the trail. 400EX, not adjustable enough, maybe a little too soft overall. KFX 450. Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at everything that was out there, with the exception of maybe the Can-Am DS 450, which they had that bike set up plush. I mean, that thing ate up twigs, so you didn't feel squat. But other than that, the
Z didn't run long enough.
What's that?
Because it didn't run long enough.
Right, because it didn't run long enough. That is facts. But the Z400 shocks, like, Suzuki nailed that bike, because to me, it's like the Honda TRX 450R out of the box was a very confused bike. It didn't really, to me, it didn't make much sense. You had kind of trail suspension with a motocross gearbox and a corked up motocross engine and a narrow chassis. So to me, it was like you had to do something to that bike to take it in whatever direction you wanted to take it to. Like if you wanted it to be a better trail bike, had to make some changes. You wanted to make it a race bike, you had to make a lot of changes. Z400 out of the box, for trail riding, it was a dream. You know, it just did everything well. It pulled hard off the bottom, which is where trail riders want it. Had good mid-range, great suspension, good handling. I mean, yeah, overall, it's a better bike than the 400. I think maybe it just, the 400EX kind of pops into my head over the Z400 just because there was so much anticipation and hype and excitement because it was the first to come back to the market, you know, 10 years after the TRX 250R left. So yeah, as far as performance goes, the Z is a better bike. There's no doubt about it.
I don't think in quality versus maybe you're categorizing in riding, and I can't totally argue with you on that. But as far as sheer quality, the 400EX kills that Z400.
Fair.
You know, durability, longevity of life, you're going to have a 400EX long for a lot longer than you're going to have a Z400. But that's neither here nor there. You know, guys, I want to really get into this discussion, and I don't think we're ever going to come to a real concrete top five in the sport quad world. Like Mr. Bean said in the chat, hey, we love sport quads, all of them. You know, even the ones that you don't want your friends to catch you riding. We love them all. And if I got my druthers, I'm gonna go ride any one of those sport quads that I said that I don't like. I'd still go ride them just because they're a sport quad and they're a lot of fun. And yes, I'd go ride a KFX 700 any day of the week, no problem, anywhere, no problem. It's a great machine. Even a 660 Raptor. You guys capping on my machines that I got to race and enjoy. My feelings are a little bit hurt, but I'll get over it.
You know, I came across some old photos of the Raptor 660 that you raced in the desert. I think I did a photo shoot with you back then or something. But yeah, I'll have to pull some of those old photos up and run them on the Dirt Wheels page here soon. This is a flashback.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the Raptor 660 just irritates me a little extra because these guys who still have them, they try to sell them and they're like selling them at a proud price. It's like, look, bro, you go 1 year newer and get a Raptor 700. It's a way better bike. Stop trying to price that tippy, dual carbureted, problematic, whatever. I mean, yeah, I liked it. It was fun. I rode one. It was cool, but stop. You know, 660 owners, you're way too proud. You are way too proud. That should be $1,000, $1,500 less than the next year newer Raptor 700. And so yeah, quit pretending like you got something better than you got.
Well, the frame was butter. Every time we raced it, we had to strip it to the bare frame, you know, get the paint off of it, weld it, fix cracks. We probably had more than 60 man hours in fabrication and working on that machine to keep the frame from breaking in half underneath us. Granted, my nephew and I were both heavy. I was 240 at the time, and he was probably 270. So we were both big boys riding that machine and had a lot of success with it. It was fun. Got second in Vegas to Reno on it. Eichner and Spaeth beat us by 26 seconds. A couple of the races we finished on the podium, ended up, I think, number 3 that year in Best in the Desert. So back when Best in the Desert had, you know, 10, 11 teams that could win it on any given day. So it was a lot of fun. But let's get to my other topic here, guys. I want to shift gears on this one. This one's going to create some havoc. Probably get some red faces, maybe some angry conversations going in the chat. You know, we talk about great ATV racers all the time, and a lot of people focus on one specific talent range, whether it be motocross, cross country, or off-road desert. The off-road desert guys never, or the endurance riders never get categorized in the top 5, or even in the top 10. But if you have to think about history of the ATV racers, go back and think of the top 5 guys, or the top 10 guys that you could think of in the industry based on their accomplishments and how they rate down. Jeff's already taken notes. I see this. Joe's ears are smoking, so he's thinking, because he's been around for a long time. I don't know how you guys are doing in the chat with what I'm talking about, but when we talk about the greatest, don't just pick a motocross guy. Don't just pick a guy that's won 9 XC titles in a row. Yeah, that's a great accomplishment, but that doesn't mean he's the greatest ATV racer of all time. So as you think about this, I have a bias, and I'm going to, blatantly, put myself on the target list to be, shoot your arrows at me, because I am biased to the guy that I would pick as the all-time. But
I think I'll help you with that, actually.
I think I will too.
Yeah, you guys can throw the arrows at me and tell me I'm full of shit, and that's okay. But it's not that I don't respect these other guys. I just don't think that they're as diverse. And one of the guys that didn't win a lot of titles, that was a freaking phenomenal rider, picked him as one of the all-time greats. Shane Hitt said that this guy is one of the all-time greatest underrated ATV racers ever. And if Shane Hitt says it, who is not known for holding his tongue in any category, that's pretty impressive, I think. So, Joe, what do you think? Or you know what? I started with Joe on the other. Let's start with you, Jeff. What do you think about these riders, and where would you categorize some of them?
In no particular order, because they are several different disciplines, and one is every discipline. And I think that's where your rider, your favorite on your list. But I'll start off with the guy who really got me. I bought an '89 Banshee, and this guy was making all the news back at the time. I bought it brand new. I remember it would be Dean Sundahl. I'm a desert guy, a former desert racer. The things he was doing with the Banshee, he was the reason I put a set of Toomey pipes on my Banshee back in the day. I just couldn't get enough of that guy. I started racing desert, got to meet him a couple of times, and it's just legendary stuff there. Doug Eichner, for sure, for all the reasons that we've talked about in the past. He's done everything, whether it was racing in Baja, desert, motocross, cross country, GP, just won everywhere. And these are just some personal favorites too. One that's still racing right now, Bo Barron, who has won more championships with Works than any other rider. I don't know if anybody's ever going to beat him. Maybe Braxton Gross, if he continues to race Works. He's doing GNCC and Works. There's an up and comer that we could do a whole topic on, is Braxton with his program. Bill Balance, one of the best at GNCC, legendary stuff. I got to meet him for the first time actually a couple of months ago when Joe and I were in Georgia. Super cool, down to earth guy, and still, you don't hear anything about him, but man, he looks like he could go out and just kick some ass still. He's just got, monkey arms and stuff on him. And then I'll go with Barry Hawk. Look, he did it all on an ATV and turned around and did it all again on 2 wheels. Him, and I had another toss up there, Bob Sloan, who legendary racer from the Blackwater days. That's my list.
Joe, what do you think, bro?
Well, I'm going to struggle to get 5, but I've got 3. I'll kind of go with, I'll throw Dean on my list. I'm stealing it from Jeff, but not just the fact that, that guy had a long career. I was watching Honda promo videos with, Dean Sundahl in it back from 1980 when Honda released the first ATC 250R. And, he was the guy then, and, or at least one of the guys, but if not the guy. And then I'm watching this guy in Huevos movies, in the 90s ripping on a Desert Banshee. So, he did some different disciplines. He raced different kinds of ATVs, completely different. So, he's got,
Three-wheelers.
what's that?
Three-wheelers too. Yeah.
So I'm saying, yeah, back to the ATC 250R. So, he rode the change from 3 to 4 wheels. I think Gary Denton has to be on the list, and the reason I put him on the list is because, and these are not in any particular order, because back then, you could race for a motocross title, you could race for a TT title, from what I understand. Lenny, correct me if my racing knowledge is wrong, but then you could race for the overall title, which was a combination of the TT and motocross. Those guys had to show up, and they've had 2 different bikes. They had to race different disciplines. And I think, to win that GNC overall championship back in the day, Denton could ride TT and motocross. And I'm sure he did some stadium racing. So you got to have Denton on the list. And then Doug Eichner, because, he raced motocross, he raced works, he was there at the Great Outdoor Games, if I remember correctly, when that was on ESPN 18 years ago. He was there, if I recall correctly. Yeah, and then there's so many other great racers. It's hard to pick, because everybody is so kind of pigeonholed into their own, form.
Doug Gust. Yeah. Digger. You got to throw that name out there too.
You guys touched on some great riders, and we also forgot a few great riders in there. Gust. You have current Chad Weenan, Joel Hetrick's going to be on that list. Joel and Chad are definitely going to be on that list. There's probably a handful of other guys that we are forgetting in the realm of greats.
I think the hardest thing for me, Lenny, is that, it's kind of like when you talk about who's the greatest ATV racer of all time, you got to look for the Malcolm Smith. You got to look for the guy who will go race a desert race one week and a motocross the next week and a hare scramble the next week. And I just don't think we have quite as much crossover between the different disciplines as we used to. And I think that's what makes it hard, because, we're leaving a ton of big names where you're like, who are the top 5 greatest motocross racers of all time, or cross country racers of all time? That would be a little easier to come up with 5. But when you start looking for who can go out there and do it all and compete on a 4-wheeler, that's tough. Me and my buddy Nick Lalani were even discussing, like, it would kind of almost be fun to do an event where you had to build a 4-wheeler that you would have to, over the course of a week or something, do it almost like a trial, a different trials type event, not trials riding, but different kind of racing. Like, you have to build a 4-wheeler, you're going to race TT, you're going to race motocross, you're going to do an endurance race, almost 3 or 4 different disciplines, and whoever scores the highest in all of them combined, ATV world champion, for like a guy that can do it all, not just a specialty rider on a specialty machine, but a guy who can just build a quad that can go do all kinds of stuff and go out there and be the overall average fastest guy at all combined disciplines. But that doesn't seem to exist anymore, as far as people doing that too much.
No,
So,
go ahead.
I think Lenny, you and I talked about that a little bit this last week. I think sponsors kind of get in the way of it anymore. I've talked to Bo Barron about, what are other series he'd like to go race, and he right away was like, would love to go race GNCC, but some of my sponsors just, they said, we pay you to do this, you're going to do this. They don't want him going out getting hurt. This was a couple of years ago. So yeah, I think, with a lot of these top riders where they have sponsorship deals that are paid to win in a certain series, and they want them just to concentrate on that one series.
Timmy Farr is a guy that we didn't talk about. Timmy Farr
Right.
did development for the KTM with Shane Hitt, did development for the TRX 450R with Honda, and he's won motocross, he's won TT. He did some desert racing, he did some endurance racing. Not as famed in a lot of ways outside of his circle of people that talk about him in the industry, but in the world stage, he's one of the guys you have to put in that group with Sundahl and Eichner that could do everything. I think Shane didn't win as many titles, but Shane was a very talented rider as well. There again, not winning as many titles, but could do many different things and ride in different terrains. So you have to look at some of that stuff. You go back to the early guys that got X'd out of the industry earlier due to age or finances. You have guys like Don Turk, Joel Bontou, who is still working in France with Yamaha, promoting a bunch of their different stuff. I seen him on a Banshee on the asphalt, and he's got to be in his 50s, and he can still rip. So there's a lot of different people that I don't think we could ever justifiably lock it down.
Right.
I agree.
And there's just so many great guys. You get back into the three-wheeler stuff, Dean wasn't the only guy that transitioned over into four wheels. Mike Coe, he rode for Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki. So he's been around. He won a lot of races on the Suzuki. He won some stuff in the desert on the Banshee. He was on the first time Banshee team to win in Baja. So Marty Hart did some great stuff racing three-wheelers and four-wheelers as well. And just to go back to you, Joe, with Gary Denton, he won a Mickey's title. He won the GNC title, TT and motocross. The combined title, I think he won both motocross and ATV to win a couple years, besides winning just the overall points. I'd have to go back and do some research to figure that out exactly, because I know some years there were TT champions and motocross champions, but the overall title holder, was Denton. There again, I do admit my biases with Doug, because I was his mechanic. I was there for a lot of the things that he did. Spent a lot of years traveling the country and the world with Doug, and great guy. Still friends with him today. I'm taking him to the Legends race. And we'll get to see him there. Jeff, you're unfortunately not going to be there with us, but Joe and I'll be there. Yeah, I can't believe you can't get Dirt Wheels to give you a ticket. It's just a plane ticket. Come on, it's a big multi-trillion-dollar company like they are. No, really, I appreciate the content, and I hope in the chat that the discussion goes on, because we're going to bring this back up next week and give you guys some times to soak it up, think about it, and open the discussion and talk about more riders that we didn't talk about today, because I think one of the things that's lost in our industry is history. Bill Balance kind of rode a carbureted Yamaha, then he rode the fuel injected Yamaha, and some of the things he did back then are what they do today. And talk about Barry Hawk. God, rode a quad, then jumped on a motorcycle and won on a motorcycle. It's always the other. He's the only guy to go from four wheels to two wheels. Most guys go from two to four.
Right.
Jeff,
there's a lot of guys out there doing both at the same time too, especially out here on the West Coast.
Right. You brought up Bo Barron. He's
Yeah.
won titles on a motorcycle. He's won works titles on an ATV, 11 to be in fact. And he's won, and he just got cheated out of his 12th title this year by the owner of Works. Cannot believe that happened. Just blatantly just took it right out of his hands. Unreal. He also won UTV titles. You know,
Yeah.
I think Eichner won UTV title in the very beginning at Works, or it might have been quad cross. Not sure. I don't remember. I wasn't working with Doug at that time when he did that, but I think he won a title doing that. But so guys in the chat, please continue with your picks on who these guys are, because we need to have this conversation, and maybe we can crown a champion of our own, or champions on our own, in the future, and talk more about this, because the history of the sport, the history of where we come from is so important. And not all of these guys are able to talk to us and sit down and tell us the history of the sport. So we have to go and dig it out of the archives ourselves. Joe, you've been around a long time. Not quite as long as I have, but you've been around a long time. You've seen a lot of cool things. So you have some history that you can talk about. Jeff, I know you've been around a long time as well. So you can, add to the conversation. In closing, Jeff, where would you go with this?
And as far as the racers, well, I'll just throw a couple of two more names that I just thought of, and one of them that we talked about this week, who are thoughts and prayers with this guy, Mike Penland. It's another great racer.
Yes.
Who has been around for a long time doing this stuff. He's, raced cross country back east and would come out here and race the Baja 1000 every year too. I got to race against him in the 4x4 class back in 2009. Great guy. Another one, William Yoakley. There's another name that we didn't bring up, who was one of my favorites to watch back in the day. There's that. Is Ian still in here? I'm just wondering if we're going to go do some riding at a motocross track. I think I'm committed out in Gallup, New Mexico in a couple of weeks. We're going to do some YFZ stuff out there, some more testing with the new products that we put on this machine.
Nice. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, get out of this heat.
Joe did harass us while we were doing that.
Oh, I did. I'm a professional troll. One of the best.
So, Joe, where do you think the conversation should go?
As far as
on these riders?
I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to quantify. I don't claim to be a racing expert as far as the history. I mean, you know more about it than me. It's like I would have never thought about Mike Coe until you brought him up. Then it's like, wow, that guy rode for all three companies. Oh yeah, all those disciplines. So, yeah, I would almost defer to your opinion a little bit on this one. Maybe with a little more time to think about it, I could pull a few more out of my butt. I'd probably call John Pellin and have him give me a cheat sheet, because that guy knows a lot about ATV racing history, and he'd probably be a great one to come on and talk about it, because he was so involved in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. He'd have a pretty stacked opinion, I would think.
Yeah, he would. I'll have to reach out to him, see if I can get him on the show next week. You could call Alan Knowles too, because Alan has been around for a long time, and he's really educated on a lot of these guys, and he has his biased opinions as well. One of the guys that has passed on, Charlie Shepard, that guy was a phenomenally awesome rider. Outdoor motocross, stadium, he could TT. I'll bet you money he would have been a pretty good endurance rider if he didn't snap the machine in half. But just really outstanding people that could ride. Mark Earhart was a great rider. He rode some Pondezvous stuff he also rode some outdoor motocross in stadium. He was more of a stadium guy, Mr. Clean, nice dressed, hair combed, didn't want to go out and, be in the hot, sweaty back east mug that we had to deal with. I don't know how well he did in the TT stuff. I don't remember off the top of my head, but
You would think if he was in the Mickeys, he would be a good TT rider.
I think that he had some really good braking control, but it is a different technique. The one guy that explains it the best, in my knowledge, is Shane. When you talk to Shane, because he rode Mickeys, he rode TT, he's driven race cars. He has a really good take on it. I really enjoy speaking with him about setup and things like that. He tries not to convey, that much, but if you get him talking long enough, he will come up with some really good insights on how these things, how setup plays a bigger part in your TT or your race car setups, getting the traction to the ground. A guy that had 11 sets of front shocks for a TT bike. I mean, come on. There was nobody in the pits had that, but him.
He just changed the shock.
Right. That's what he said. He said, I just come in and change the shocks. Not the settings, just the shocks. I think they had swing arms in 1/2-inch increments as well. I mean, that's intense.
We could talk about, who do you think is the next up and coming legend in ATV racing?
Oh, that's a next week.
Coming from where?
From any discipline. Who is somebody you think that's going to stand out as potentially the next guy that everybody's going to put a bullseye on?
Okay, that's a deep, deep question, and I have a lot of answers for you, in different realms and how to explain it. And we'll get into it next week. You in next week, Jeff?
I am now. I guess I stepped into it. So yeah, I'll be here next week.
If you would help, reach out to John Pellin, because I'm going to text him right after we're done here and see if I can get him on for next week as well. And we can dive deep into these conversations with the history and then the up and comers. And Jeff, I'll tell you right now, that is a difficult question, because so many things change year to year and life.
Yeah, I'm saying, who do we see right now? And you're right, a lot of things could change. Injuries affect a whole career, and who knows where ATV racing is headed in the future. I think it's on an upswing. I have one person in mind who I've already brought up today. But yeah, we'll continue that next week.
Oh, Braxton Groves, yes, he's definitely on par to be something special in this industry. But there again, I've seen what I thought were the end all be alls disappear.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, as always, thank you so much. Joe, you were a little subdued and quiet today. I think that you're still in shock that Jet Lawrence is hurt and not racing outdoor motocross. And
trying to cope.
Yeah, I can see that you're suffering. Our topics were really good today, guys. You guys are awesome and always great to talk to. Joe, you still need to get me that 250R so that I can get you out here on the West Coast and we can put a machine together as well, like I did with Jeff.
Ooh, yeah, and I'll film it. So, all right, I'm not going to make fun of dirt wheels today since I'm actually on the show.
Your videos are way better than mine, I gotta admit.
Hey, everybody, here's the thing. Subscribe, become a Dirt Wheels subscriber, subscribe to ATV On Demand, UTV On Demand. Please subscribe to ATV-TALK. Help us grow in the algorithms so that we can bring you more shows like this. And I know everybody asks you to subscribe or follow or do that. We have to do this. We have to ask. We need your help so that we can grow, so that we can bring you more shows. Because believe it or not, this is not free for us. It's taking resources, time, and money, and we're putting this all together for you. And no, to watch the shows, to subscribe to these people, it is, well, I think Dirt Wheels charges, but Joe doesn't and I don't. So Please subscribe. And, you're getting a paperback magazine with dirt wheels. You just get to watch us on YouTube or whatever it is, whatever channel that you catch us on. So, gentlemen, again, thank you very much for being on the morning show. Joe, as always, it's a pleasure. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, and this ain't free, because wait till Lenny gets the bill from me and Jeff for coming on this show. Man,
Right.
I hope Elk is paying well.
Not enough. I can already tell you. Not enough. With that one, I can already tell you I'm in trouble. Oh, thanks, guys. Everybody in the chat, thank you for chiming in. MX Beans was just freaking tearing it up today. He had a lot to say. I apologize for not covering it all, but thank you guys so much, and we will catch you next week. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thanks, Lenny.